Release your inhibitions. Feel the rain on your skin. No one else can feel it for you. I absolutely love all the wonderful dogs on this earth, sparing a modicum of reservations surrounding fighting and attack dogs. Not to be confused with guard dogs. Rottweilers are guard dogs. German Shepherds are attack dogs. Pit Bull Terriers are fighting dogs. They're not guard dogs like some lunatics paint them as. They're the most complicated dog breed that has like hard-locked genetics, the same way as if there was a human being whose skull was shaped like a V that prevented their brain from forming. The Aztecs and the Mayans actually did this. It was a skull binding thing. This is crazy. The Aztecs and the Mayans actually did this. They took boards, they took planks, and they made this contraption, and they put babies' heads in it. Swear to God. This is easy detectable in fossil records because of the skull. And it smashed the front of the skull down. And that literally, like, turned them into a pit bull. No joke. And that explains a lot of how the evil priestly caste of the Nahuatl and their slightly less evil but very, very esoteric and in many ways dark and I want to say old world, but it's like ancient world, you know. Olmecs, the Zapotec and the Maya, they have some really ancient stuff, especially the Olmecs. Whereas the Nahuatl are relatively new. I think the Nahuatl has only been around for like 800 years or so. And so, like, the real evil ones was the Aztecs and Aztec superculture. But the Mayans aren't necessarily free of sin either. We oftentimes misconstrue child burials as child sacrifices. Children died. Children still die. And they're buried. And that doesn't mean child sacrifice. The Aztecs were cannibals. The Aztecs were, you know, psychopaths, like textbook psychopaths. But, and here's the crazy thing is the Aztecs were so aggressive that they scared the Spanish away. And I hate to say this, but this is what happened. The Spanish ended up like hounding and harrowing the Maya to near cultural extinction. Nearly culturally extinct, the poor Maya, because of massive burning of manuscripts, massive harrowing of the weaker, more antiquated Mayan population in the Yucatan Peninsula and below. Whereas the Aztecs, in harsher lands with sharper weapons and a bigger fighting spirit, were kind of passed over in many ways. Although Our Lady of Guadalupe, being consecrated to this land, the Spanish bringing pigs over, literally ended the need for human sacrifice, and a lot of people actually converted because they didn't want to do that. Whereas the priests would probably never give up their situation of power, because in their minds they're one of the many doomsday cults that you see, like the people that think that bringing all the Jews back to the Holy Land is somehow going to cause, you know, Christ to come back on a winged horse with a flaming sword in his hand, which is the textbook Jewish Messiah. This is all derived from like the Schofield Bible being introduced as a legitimate Bible and not a propaganda tool, because that's what it is. It's a propaganda tool for this Judeo-Christian. One would like Hitler would call it Bolshevism, but I don't think that's accurate. I think what it is it's theosophy. It's theosophy. What the Zionists did is they observed the toolbox of theosophy. Imagine a big tackle box full of everything you need. And they opened it up and they went, ooh, this would be perfect. This matches up with our race and everything. And like, Jewishness these days is not that much of a racial thing, whereas previously it was like, you know, more of a contiguous unit, even though people never really associated Jews as a race. They associated a religion. There was a contiguous bloodline within the Yiddish, a very specific non-Indo-European synthesis branch that synthesized Indo-European and non-Indo-European languages. The Yiddish language is one of the most, actually genuinely one of the most fascinating languages. But recently, the Zionists, this is very important. The word Zionist, I give you my word, never appears in history. Anywhere it is completely made up. There's a mountain called Bergamo in Italy. There's people who call themselves Pergamons. Like they that particular mountain is their particular thing. I bet there's people in the Basque country that call themselves Pyrenees. You know, Zionists literally just us have association with Mount Zion. That's it. That's it. That's it. And they specifically attach themselves to that because it would be a very, very good choke point for global trade. That's why. And it aligned with a little bit of race. It aligned with a little bit of trade. It worked perfectly around the lines that it needed to manipulate the British and their effective altruism into breaking the world. Like, I guarantee you, Zionism is a cancer that will eat the body of Europe and Christendom. It will eat it. It will consume it. And it might kill the entire thing, including itself. Because it seems to have a type of tumor-like growth cycle that does not know when to stop. The same thing goes for our multi-billionaires, Wall Street people with brain damage that don't know when to stop. Those people have tumor brain. And they just suck up resources from the other parts of the body and inflate themselves in the sphere, so relevance, etc., power, etc., etc., and then collapse because they can't handle it all on their own, and they're not designed to handle it all on their own. Nobody's designed to handle it on their own. Tumors think that they're designed to handle on their own because they don't know their proper place. They don't know, their proper control, and it's that simple. But back to dogs. Beagles sound terrible. What the process of breeding that dog did to its vocal cords is one of the greatest tragedies of this planet. I mean, that and the great Anthropocene mass extinction event we're currently in the middle of right now that really started to kick off in the 1970s. And, it's really the introduction of the chainsaw. That's really what did it. As soon as creeps got their hands on chainsaws and cocaine. That's essentially what it is. Chainsaws and cocaine. That's the thing that damned many, many portions of a previously beautiful world. Damned them. It will take so much mercy and duty and dedication and love to regenerate that from its state, to rise it up from its fallen state, because it is so damned. The raping and the pillaging, not only cutting down the trees, rooting out the stumps so that all the ground just gets kicked up, and now it's circulating with air and stuff like that, and people then plant very aggressive foreign plants for produce, and then that sucks up the nutrients very quickly, sucks up the water very quickly, leaves the area desiccated, and that's exactly how the Dust Bowl started. So, you can actually look at the maps and see how it's been a long, steady stream of deforestation in America, but the 1970s is when things went absolutely crazy. And the crazy thing is, Carter, behind the scenes, was doing a lot of evil things. He's doing a lot of evil things. And that's a problem, because the long-term consequences of Carter's action is Iran as it was in the 80s and 90s when they were doing the terrorist attacks that got them the bad PR that today is being exploited to aggressively attack them in an offensive war of aggression with very, very little evidence and almost no international backing that could backfire so tremendously. Thankfully, quite literally, Trump made it as limited a strike as possible. It's very likely that not a lot of nuclear energy stuff was damaged because it was moved around, because the Fordo base had not only been evacuated, but a tremendous amount of dirt had been piled up around it. And dirt is really, really bad for bombs and bunker busters. It really does displace a lot of energy. And sand displaces a lot of energy too. And I saw 6 penetrative holes inside of Fordo. And what that could mean is it could have caved in a lot of stuff. That's entirely possible, but I've heard they evacuated a lot of stuff. I don't think Trump cares that much. I think Trump made a deal with Netanyahu, and the deal was, I do this, you take care of the rest. And Britain's going to get involved as they do with everything. It's crazy. Imagine being like a British soldier. You have to fight for Ukraine. You have to fight for Israel. Your your prospects as a peacekeeper is effectively making the world a tremendously worse place. Wow, that sucks. Poor British. And that's why everybody hate them. But, yeah. I think the final solution for the null question isn't hunting him down and dropping a baby grand piano on his head, but to ensure, with every bit of effort I can, that he never gets close to the levers of power. An extremely easy thing to do, given his actions through time. He likely has deluded himself into thinking the only people that dislike him are trannies. Au contraire. Leftists glomming onto anti-Israel rhetoric is the exact same easy-as-pie gambit as the right glomming onto anti-trans rhetoric. Everybody already believes that. These are both like 70 to 80% consent issues. And these are issues that specifically carve out the more radical members of the political party that you don't like. But in general, a vast majority of people, especially a vast majority of the center, agrees on both of these issues, that trannies don't belong in the bathroom that they choose, but instead, have to give respect to other people and other stuff. Like, the biggest thing is the child stuff, because that is, like, as I just described, like the whole Mayan skull binding thing, like when you don't have time to grow to 25 and your executive function isn't, like, you make such poor decisions, you make such rash decisions, you are so easily manipulated, you are not thinking ahead, you are acting so irresponsibly. And that just goes to, like, that's it, It's one of the reasons why people still frown on like an 18 to 36 relationship, Guys 36, girls 18, everybody frowns on that because the girl's not gonna, like, mature for another, like, 5 or 6 years. Given Null's recent heel term, and I give you my word, he did not used to be like this. He actually praised Muslims in the past for defending women against assault from raging trannies. Literally the same time the other Zionist activated, he likely started receiving bribes, and I've talked about this before. And now he thinks he's living large and untouchable. But the chances of him getting touched are very, very high, especially the more confident he gets. Because that confidence will eventually lapse into a sort of a Dunning-Kruger effect. Many, many people on the forums are aware of this, when your confidence isn't warranted to the situation. But if you look at the other end of the Dunning-Kruger effect, people who are very proficient in things are, like, literally, like, rolling their eyes at people calling them Dunning-Kruger, because that's the point where you have achieved both proficiency and confidence. That's on the very end of the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's just the maximum amount of time and effort put into things. And what's crazy is, like, I know for an absolute fact, I was a really, really, really good cellist. I'm very, very, very rusty now. What made me a really, really good cellist is practicing 3 hours a day, every single day, because it was very, very fun, and I didn't have anything else to do. And that's legitimately something that set me up for a very, very good life, but I ultimately... The fact of the matter is, there's not a lot of routes. There's really not a lot of routes for the arts in America. In Italy, there's a lot of routes for the arts, and they still have school for the arts. And people, and that's one of the reasons why romance is still alive in Italy, and women always, look at Italian men like, hearts in their eyes, because romance and the arts and the spiritual and the soft and the right brain, that stuff is alive, as opposed to everything being engineering. What a dull, dumb, lackluster society. Everything is engineering. The funnest thing people can do is go fast. What a dumb society. And now everything's so, like, the engines that we make in America are so, well, not just America, like, they make these horrible engines in Germany too. The engines that are being made these days, supplied to the mindset of the people that only see going fast as, like, the pinnacle of life's achievements, are so loud and powerful, for lack of a better word, because what's the power translate into if it's only, like, two-dimensional, only flat plane crap? That they vibrate to the point where they molest people. They're constantly touching people. And the degree to which you feel it is the degree to which you're like big or small. So I've literally watched children cringe in pain as some jackass in a motorcycle without a muffler guns it, and the child is just cringing in pain. And that's the sort of reality that we've entered into, and that's the sort of stuff that the rest of the world really looks at America with disgust at. Nobody acts like that. Although there is a really big problem with rice rockets in Europe, you know, jackasses driving the rice rockets everywhere, sounding like mosquitoes, sounding like the worst whine and wail possible, just so they can get their little dopamine rush. I really hate all that, and I understand some people like to watch racing. I think that's fucking stupid. That doesn't mean that person is stupid, pardon my French, but I think it's stupid. Because I think I'm the bigger picture, and it's just not something I was raised on. It's not something that I enjoy. Like, NASA is quite literally the most... I would probably kill myself if I was forced to watch NASA for an extended period of time. So, the unfortunate reality is it's entirely defensive to ensure Null never gets close to the levers of power in my country, and since he's a resident of my state, it's my responsibility. He's shown himself to be a deviant, a liar, and someone who has zero empathy for children. Even if he likes to argue about this, that, or the third. I don't even know if I trust anonymity anymore. They can't ban everyone for hate speech or anti-Semitism. Nobody on the little I internets would be there. You know, the multiple separate internets that don't form a singular and thus don't constitute a proper noun. People just need to take their masks off while protecting the routers. It's that simple. Oh, and I'm pretty sure Null DDoSed me in the past. Because I'm finding out he does scrape IPs. And it's the only time I've ever had DDoSing directed towards my house. And it took a lot to get in control of. Eventually we got in control over it. But he scraped my IP and likely started hitting my network when he wanted to be the center of attention in chat. Now, I have no confirmation of this, but I have the deepest gut feeling based on all the simulations that I've ran over this. I've been thinking about this for years, because I've been thinking about this since this happened. I thought about, like, how come it never happened before, and it's not happening again. Don't have to change my tactics, etc., etc. And I had to jump through a lot of hoops, so it's definitely something that I remember. Why did that happen? And I really genuinely do believe that that was Null. Which just if that's true, I'm not saying it is. If that's true, he stands for nothing. He stands for nothing. He's exactly like Matthew Prince. He's exactly like Ethan Ralph. In many parts of him, exactly like Nick. You know. Some parts of him are like Dick Masterson. And, you know, a lot of the stuff that he said he stood for, he does not. I don't even know. We'll see. See how that all works out. I was pretty upset with him recently, but I understand that it's not necessarily something that he could have foreseen, because Katz never, ever indicated to anybody that he ever had a problem. He was just the most positive ray of sunshine and creativity and love. And it's a big loss. It's a huge loss on the entire planet that happened, but it happened. People have their free will. Yeah, I have a church and a family to think about. We're going to do this the right way. We're going to do this the long way. Pray often. Pray even if your spirit is unwilling. Even if you're just going over the words. Pray. Because when you pray good prayers hundreds of times, you feel like a hypocrite if you don't live these words. Now let's say a very important prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Jail actually isn't that boring. It's filled with fascinating, intelligent, spiritual, entertaining people, much to my surprise. Yes. 40-50% or so are crackheads, but they mostly keep to themselves, actually. Probably about 35 to 40% are crackheads. Like, you'd be surprised how many good people are in jail, like genuinely good people. You whittle it, like they may seem mean at first, but you whittle them down to the barest nub, and they're actually just hearts of gold, and they're stuck in jail. They're stuck in the cycle because they're institutionalized and they can't live outside. Uh, School kind of starts us off on that path, and the school where kids went to the church and they sat down with a nun, and like legitimately, like you picture 1700s America school. You don't go to a school, you go to the church. That's what these schools were. And if you look at old media, like media depicting stuff from like really long time ago, 1800s, they go to the church. They go to a church, like usually a Protestant church. So it's slightly iconoclastic, but very tall for its Gothic influence, for the high Gothic influence of the Nords. And they go in there, and it's one classroom, and everybody knows each other. It's from the same village, and everybody learns relevant stuff, reading, writing, arithmetic. You know, they learn cultural relevance and stuff like that. And they don't get brainwashed by a state to forget their cultural identity and bleed into the cultural identity of everybody in their borders, which is an erasure, which is a graying. And what Germany did is a graying and an erasure and something terrible. And yes, if they would have just destroyed Rothenburg and Frankfurt and Hamburg, I would have been perfectly fine with that. But no! You gotta kill Oldenburg too? And Frisia? Come on, guys! Not Frisia! I love the Frisians. But back to jail. It's the problem is thinking about all the stuff you're missing on the outside. That's actually really painful. The most painful is having a child, or having family, or a pet on the outside. I've heard it. I felt it, to a lesser extent than some. It's miserable. It's awful. When you have an elderly dog or something like that, and you think that they could die at any moment, and you have like hurricanes hitting and stuff like that, it's miserable. And you worry about your family too, and you're not there to protect them and you know, do boarding up stuff during a hurricane. Right? That's miserable. But having there's no pain compared to having a child on the outside and being stuck incarcerated. That is true agony. But at least it's the sort of agony that seems to like get people back on the. Some people are incarcerated unfairly, very unfairly. The degrees of unfairness vary, but at least going through that helps you remind yourself: don't get caught, don't get caught lacking, even if you weren't doing anything bad. Don't get caught slacking by some, jackass. And focus on your family, Don't go running around doing crazy stuff. Don't go playing fast and loose. Think about your family. But if you can block that out, or just not have anything to lose, it's really not all that bad. Sometimes when you're brushing your teeth, or laying on the cold steel bunk with a paper-thin mattress, it feels wrong. It's the toothpaste isn't good enough, the toothbrushes are real crappy, and the bunks are varying degrees, but in the jail, that's just insanely bad. Very, very, very painful if you have any injuries. Very, 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 very painful if you have any injuries. But after 2 weeks or so, that tends to fade away. Sam Hyde's probably said this before, but when I heard him say Fish Tank is a psychological horror show, all made perfect sense. A lot of stuff clicked. I'm still not going to watch it because it's annoying, forced garbage, and we've already lived through like 3 decades of contracts forcing actors into painful situations. But it makes sense now. I'm not going to watch Mr. Breast. I'm not going to watch Celebrity Boxing. Piss off with that absolute garbage. Not insulting you, but that's not something I want to see. Maybe it's lowest common denominator, and so there's a vast majority, there's a ton of people, and they got very loose wallets that are into torturing retards in a horror house where people throw stuff all over the place and scream. Not me. You know, some schools literally have events where kids go and break cars with bats. I'm not joking. Not joking. I'm not sure if this has been a thing for a while or if this is a recent thing, but what that does is it trains these kids to go out and do the sort of stuff that we see during sports riots or during political riots, tipping over cars, burning stuff. And I think all the time about like all the burning lithium batteries. Lithium lasts forever. But if you burn it, it releases so much energy and then it's gone. And then you can't get it back. You can't manufacture lithium. You can't manufacture lithium. You can't manufacture lithium. You can't manufacture gold. So all this crap where you have robot cars that nobody wants and then people light them on fire. It's terrible. Like those Waymos are so expensive. And people would much rather get an Uber or a Lyft. But they're there for people to burn and to get footage on the camera to scare people and sell more crappy politics for decades to come. You know, comedy is found in empathy, which isn't some superpower inherent in special snowflake indigo star children. It's a skill refined by practice in forming complex systems in your head, using your ability to see and say the truth to program the variables in your mind into accurate parameters and running as many simulations as you can. To try and think about how people would respond to various things. I genuinely do not believe AI can do this, despite the fact that it always pretends it can. It's a shell game. It is a puppet show. I can see the puppet show. That because I learned a little bit of coding, and I'm also very good at pattern recognition, and I have a good memory. So I can see that AI is a puppet show because it doesn't actually know what things are. And if it doesn't know what things are, it has no idea what it's doing. It's stumbling around in the dark. Modern politics is devoid of this also. And the situation gets worse every single year. The more weight people put on their egos alone. The ego and its own. As in, not what they're capable of, but how they're feeling in the moment. The worse the situation gets. I would say the same thing for loving the machine, but not loving the tool that made it. Which is to say, being a consumer, but not a producer. And in the process, the darker our beautiful world and the mysterious collective unconscious becomes. Warhammer 40k really trying to bring up the quality of the collective unconscious because it involves good and bad, and you have to have that contrast. Otherwise, this gray slop. Liberal media is gray slop. Everything is so ambiguous because nothing could possibly be bad because you can't have any rules because almost everybody is an anarcho-capitalist, whether they believe it or not. They don't care about rules. They don't care about parameters. They just want gratification. F you, pay me. That's stuff people chant in their souls. That is the religion of the day. This is why Null is neither funny, accurate in his predictions, or personable. I was trying to train him into this. That's why people started to say, oh, this is the guy that he taught everything Null knows. Yeah. Hit me with that argumento ad absurdum, like you don't call out the exact same behavior when other people do it. I distinctly remember a very wise man saying that you can learn from the intelligent and you can learn from the foolish. So regardless of what people think of me, the outright dismissal that Null could have learned anything from me is itself a partisan propaganda tactic. Naturally, that's how a lot of cliques work. Now we're going to get into in-group signaling a little bit, shall we? I was trying to train him into this, and after spending 100+ hours talking about religion all over the world throughout history and how they all lead to the conclusions of Jesus Christ, I think he started to get the picture. But Easy Money started to poison him. I watched it happen. You know, you can't spell prescience without science. It's just a shame some people are lacking in common sense. See, the big problem is people's brains have been rewired to view in-group signaling as comedy. Just talking about George Floyd is enough to get some people giggling. But the issue is, in-group signaling is a really bad substitute for genuine comedy. The groups are also very subdivided. People on the far right wanted Trump to pardon Derek Chauvin, but Trump will not do this. Not because he cares about George Floyd, but because Chauvin is really bad PR. I also personally don't believe that, despite the fact that George Floyd was a very, very, very bad person, he did not overdose on fentanyl. He was a muscle-bound man. And if you see, a lot of people who don't know what it's like to be muscle-bound don't know what that does. Muscles don't just grow outward. They grow. They swell. So they grow inward as well as outward. It's like you're swelling up a balloon, right? And when they grow inward, they press on things. Your veins and your arteries compensate for it. Your airways do not. When you pin somebody who's muscle-bound, also very heavy, but also has muscles around their neck, down with your knee for 9 minutes, they will die. That's the reality of it. I don't care how bad some of the people clustering around this issue are on both sides. I don't. I called this from the very beginning, and I believe this firmly to this day, because 30 times the amount of fentanyl would not have gotten into his system that quickly if he ate it right then and there, and he wouldn't take 30 times the amount of fentanyl before going to the store and dancing around. See, this is the thing. He literally danced around in the store like 20 minutes, 30 minutes before dying. That's not how that works. And people who don't know anything about drugs, people don't know anything about muscle boundness, just immediately rushed into the propaganda. Which is like, yeah, George Floyd was a terrible, terrible person. So was Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin was a murderer already before he met George Floyd. And Derek Chauvin and George Floyd had interactions before. So this was very likely either premeditated or some form of strange plan set up by Minneapolis, set up by wherever he was bounced to, international police crap. Police unions. Police unions are some of the worst unions. I really dislike unions. I'm sorry if that upsets you. I really dislike unions. I think most union bosses are thugs and criminals and mafiosos. I think that's what most union bosses are. They just don't use physical violence, even though sometimes they do. They use economic violence, which if you're starving people, if you're preventing people from making their bills, then that does actually affect people. And none of these union bosses ever have managed to actually like put pressure on the people who actually need to put pressure on. So really, what's the point of these unions? It's to get people to click so they're properly programmed into a certain way. And when they have the proper programming and they have the certification of the unit and the group, they'll get money, which will draw more people into that group so that they can get money and put food on the table. But what the union brain does to people is make people lemmings, servile. I don't like how the U and the V are both the same exact symbol in original Latin. I really don't like that. I do like the slippery C though. But the slippery C, the SXC, that sounds, the K's and the Q's in the Semitic world, that stuff, that is in a contingent of these are the special slippery letters. U's and V's should not have the same because and V are very, very different. W, on the other hand, that's a special one. Ask the Norse about W. You know, they'll tell you what it means, but I don't think the U and the V was very intelligent. And it's very, very cool that Christianity managed to invent punctuation. I'm not sure if Christianity invented lower casing. It might have, but it definitely invented punctuation. That helped a lot. You know, a thief in a low-trust society is like a weed in a field of thickets. You cannot fault it given its state. You must always try to look to the bigger picture, growing a place too filled with produce for weeds to sow. You know, one of the early things that exposed Jordan Peterson as a deeply, deeply broken man was his piss-poor parenting. He raised a daughter that he could never let go of, to the point where she married but still goes by just Michaela Peterson, not like her two last names or her real last name, but her maiden name. She goes by her maiden name because she's so associated to her father. And as a daughter, she would attempt to kill him with poor diet and benzos. That was her direct fault. And she would never sue anybody for saying that because she would lose that court case. I think bees can detect if there's love in your heart. Shoot, I'm really good around wasps too, but bees in particular are like dogs, I think. They can sense things in people beyond simple pheromones. You know, I talked about intuition, how it's far more accurate than the scientific mind when it's tuned properly. I think dogs have been tuned with great effort. And I think there's something even deeper involving our bumble bros, the hive mind that pollinates most of our crops and give us the revered drink of mead. I would go so far as to speculate that the bee has, like the flower, made us more beautiful and interconnected with higher nature. Altruism. Bees are effective altruists, I guess. Not to be confused with the British, who are ineffective altruists. Ah! Well, that's not much of an own, because I don't really care. If you want to see the future of Zionist-controlled politics, look at Britain. All you gotta do is look at Britain. Benjamin Disraeli, stuff like that. Like, don't get me wrong, Disraeli is if Benjamin was first name, I think it was. Disraeli is an absolute genius. His mind puts a lot of the modern Zionists to absolute shame. But that's still a deep, deep cancer. That is a deep, deep cancer. And it has absolutely eroded the body of England until England is literally like a Holocaust victim now, is what it looks like, spiritually. That's the end stage of cancer. And speaking of which, priest of our organizations just passed away from long, hard fight with cancer. Please pray for him. Pray for Father Charles. Don't ever confuse the nothing happens crowd with the nothing matters crowd. There's a big difference. Don't let your Zen turn into nihilism. You're seeing two different forms of nihilism. Positive nihilism and negative nihilism on display there. I'd say cynicism is a better word for negative nihilism. And Zen, a good word for positive nihilism. The truth that nothing happens and everything matters. The worst people in the Israel-Iran thread are probably Ghost C and John Andrew Stan. Ghost C is at least somewhat intelligent, but John Andrew Stan wanted the entire thread, which is like 75% pro-Israeli propaganda posted directly from the IDF and Fox News, deleted. He goes and downvotes everybody. I happen to refresh the page at the right time. He'll downvote somebody in a single minute. He apparently reported the thread like 70 times. Like, oh my gosh. Arguing with people, crying, and it doesn't seem like English is his first language. I think he is genuinely one of the more psychotic of the Israelis, who's probably not sleeping very well right now, because there are other Israelis in that thread, and they're like, there's a younger man. His avatar is early anime with a monkey on, and I don't know his name off the top of my head. Seems like a nice young chap. And I don't know where my Ori kiwi fruit growers. Where did they go? Where'd they go? I'm a little worried about them. To be perfectly honest, I'm a little worried. But, I guy kind of exposed himself. He's not as good at propaganda as I thought. You know, he started getting real snarky. And if, you know, the U.S. does not end up kowtowing to Israel in the long run, and this is all that we're willing to do, and this is the deal that was made, I guy's gonna look a little foolish for being so confident. Meanwhile, Catch the Rainbow still really holding it together. I've earned a lot of respect for him, actually, because I knew him before. But despite that, like, You know, it's not perfect, but I have respect for Catch the Rainbow. You know, I guy always kind of gave me an off vibe. Kind of scared me, to be honest. Back when he had his ophonym, the eyes, rings upon rings, um, wheel, angels. He had his ophonym avatar. That I would always like kind of like note that guy, kind of stay clear of that guy because had this weird energy about him. I don't know. He could actually be working for like, you know, IDF security or something like cybersecurity or something like that. It's entirely possible with that particular guy. He's very, very intelligent. He has a very clear and concise methodology that looks like it's professional. That's what it looks like. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. That's speculation. But John Andrew Stan was so funny. He was literally crying about anti-Semitism, downloading every post that didn't actively fillet the aggressive Israeli cause, like literally just neutral stuff. Downvote, downvote. So mad, while contributing nothing. He contributed nothing, while like reporting like a quarter of the thread. Contributed not a thing. The thing about the JIDF, the Jewish Internet Defense Force, is it's a really diverse minority group. The gambits run from the incredibly intelligent eye guy, getting ahead of the narrative and rehabbing the dancing Israelis. Genius! Rehabbing the dancing Israelis meme. To that garbage, John Andrew Stan and his gigantic temper tantrums. I'm shocked Null hasn't banned him off the site. I think Null's trying to be a little bit nicer with the ban hammer, given the circumstances. God, man. Ah! Man. Sorry, I don't mean to slap on the camera for you. I'm really hungry, and I'm really tired. It's pretty funny, because you can feel the thread rock back and forth, depending on who's up at what times. One moment, they're absolutely loving, adoring Null's condemnation of Kamani for posting a pro-BLM tweet back in, like, what, 2018 or something? Yeah, 2018. Absolutely rallying around the family with a pocket full of shells. Next, they were bashing him for posting about the USS Liberty after somebody said, "Don't attack our ships next time," in response to the Houthis, Yemen, not Iran, Yemen. I don't care. It's like saying that if you said that every single country that American military equipment ended up was an American proxy, Iran would be an American proxy. But anyways, they were bashing him super hard for the Liberty posting, and I think I got sick of it. He really got fed up with the thread after that. But I think what actually happened, there is he posted his "do what you have to do, Netanyahu" opinion to Twitter. And I'm not sure, I'm not on Twitter, but I think he actually got mogged for that with maybe relatively intelligent criticism. I don't know. I'm just guessing. And he comes back into the Iran-Israel thread and basically goes, "You guys are weird. You guys actually have a very strange minority opinion. Would you care to discuss some of these things in detail?" And then just getting absolutely lied to and insulted. And it's just like, yeah, dude, that's the thing that I'm talking about. You're laying in the bed with bed bugs at that point, brother. Brother! All right, before I get myself in trouble, I think that's good for today. All right, y'all. Cheers.